Hello and welcome to the Tactical Podcast with me, Zach, and with you,
Anakin. Anakin.
Onakan. Yeah. So we're gonna have a quick natter about what's been happening in the Premier League of late. Hopefully you'll
Yeah.
stay tuned and you'll like it. Provide us with your feedback and comments and questions, hopefully. And yeah, just let us know what you think, and yeah, we'll just kick off then.
Let's go.
Let's go. I'm a
Let's
United
go.
fan, by the way. Just a disclaimer: I'm a United fan, and as you can tell, he's also a United fan as well.
Liverpool, mate. Oh, Liverpool all the way. Yeah, Liverpool and Galatasaray fan.
Yeah.
So obviously not having the best time this year, but we move anyway. We'll break it down. We'll break it down. We'll break
We'll
it
just
down. Well,
we'll
we
just
just
have to put that disclaimer out there because of conflicts of interest and that, if any agenda seeps through into the podcast.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. I think while we're here, we might as well start on Liverpool. What do you make of them this season? What do you think's happening? I'll get your view as a sort of, well, I was gonna say non-biased, but biased
Yeah. Well, the bias is
non-Liverpool fan.
already seeping in 2 minutes. That's fine. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a record.
So
Well,
what do you think? What do you think's going on? What's the problem? Because obviously Liverpool, they seemed like such a happy camp for the last few years, obviously under Klopp and um, no sort of problems in the dressing room, everyone working for the manager and stuff. And it seems to have all sort of fell apart this season, not only on the pitch but in the background. Especially with Melissa Reddy's article coming out today about other members of staff possibly having too much influence. So what are you making of Liverpool this season?
well, I'll speak only from the footballing point of view because you know the club better than I do. But from the football point of view, obviously, the elephant in the room is the midfield, isn't it? I mean, that midfield needs replenishing. I mean, it's been going. It's been what, over 4 years since the last midfield signing at Liverpool.
Yeah, 2019, yeah, Thiago.
29. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, it's not been the best of midfields. I mean, they look pretty ragged, to be fair. I mean, it's just there's no structure in that midfield whatsoever. It looks like Thiago's, who is perhaps the one that had the least stamina, or the one that you want to protect the most, having to do everything and cover everything. Fabinho is
Yeah.
just not there anymore. Henderson's
No.
not there anymore. Bajcetic is too young, and I feel like he's already at the deep end. But to be fair, I think he's not. He's a quality player. I think there's definitely potential there. But I don't know. That system change. You had that. Early in the season, with the 4-4-2, it seemed to have worked for a little bit, and then you revert back to the 4-3-3. A couple of games in a 4-2-3-1, which it still produced similar results. And I think teams have just found out if you just overload that midfield, Napoli's probably the best example, to be fair,
Yeah.
then you probably easy to get at. I mean, even the centre backs look a bit past their best as well. But obviously, I think a big EC extenuating circumstance is the fact that you played a record number of games last season. I mean,
Yeah.
he played every single game possible, so obviously it's inevitable there will be a dip in form, and he had that World Cup halfway through. But it seems to be that preseason seems to be an issue, and what happened during the World Cup seems to be more of an issue, which perhaps relates more to the politics side. I don't know about
Yeah.
injuries and the medical aspects and who's having an influence, particular people, etc. So, yeah, I mean, to be fair, when your player of the year is your goalkeeper, it's not really a good season, isn't it? So far.
No, yeah. Of course. Yeah. I mean, yeah, midfield's the biggest problem. But as I said, it stems back to I don't really blame the midfield because obviously Henderson's past his best. As a structure, we're just not pressing the same. Our running stats are one of the lowest in the league this year, which is uncharacteristic for a Jurgen Klopp team. You just don't see that happening. If anything, we'll run the most, and we might not get the quality, but we'll run the most. But yeah, as you said, at the end of the day, the midfield's a big problem. We've lost Wijnaldum. Henderson's lost his legs. Like, although the quality of Henderson maybe not might not be as good as, let's say, Thiago or other midfielders. He used to have legs, which he doesn't have anymore, unfortunately. Um, and yeah, it's been an area of the pitch that Liverpool have neglected over the years, as you said, 2019, the last summer signing, which we haven't done with other positions. If you look at our forwards position, we've been quite proactive in moving people on there. We've been quite proactive in the defense as well, with moving people on and getting backups. But for some reason, we've left the midfield totally untouched since 2019, and I don't know. You'd think playing a record amount of games. We literally played every game you could play last season. Um, you'd think that we'd go and get a backup in the midfield, at least one or two centre mids in the summer window. Considering Thiago's injury record, considering Naby Keita, obvious injury record, and you know Carvalho is young, having to bed in, things like that. I mean, it just hasn't helped. The lack of system change from Klopp hasn't helped. He's got to get criticism for that. You know, loyalty to certain players. That so like Fabinho, for example, who's drastically lost his legs. As we talk about quite often, I gave Fabinho a lot more time than other people because I couldn't believe the drop off. I couldn't believe someone could go from world class to one of the best teams in the world to what he is now, where he literally looks lost in midfield whenever the opposition have the ball. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think of Fabinho? Because I think a lot of I don't know if Fabinho is on top form. I don't know if Liverpool have the problems that we have. But what do you think of Fabinho?
Yeah, I mean, when he's proactive, he's a great front foot, destroyer, I think. But I think the problem with him is that he lacks a lot of coverage. So teams start just to pass around him or move around him and try and drag him out, and he looks completely lost. And I think this season is a very good example. To be fair, I started to notice telltale signs really last season at the Etihad against Man City when you were, was it 2 goals down in the first
Yeah,
half and then you came back. And he looked absolutely overrun. I thought he looked ragged, and I thought, oh, this does not look good. And then Fulham, the first game of the season, and then Napoli for me was like, okay, this is it. This is it. He
yeah,
got completely outrun by Lobotka. Even, I mean, if you have in the deepest opposition midfielder outrun you, so Lobotka in that case, then
yeah, yeah,
it's alarm bells. I mean, I can understand a lot of people have sympathy for him, saying that he is having to do a lot of jobs, and is a single pivot, and it's not
yeah,
it's not easy. But I don't know, because it's systematic, and I always say the DM is the most, in my opinion, the most important position, especially in a 4-3-3 of Klopp's or of Guardiola's style, is the most important. I mean, they build up play, but they're also there to screen and protect. And if you're not doing either, you're really not effective. And
yeah,
obviously, him having to go at Klopp against Brighton, I didn't really like. To be fair, it just shows that it's a bit. He's starting to lose a bit control. Losing a bit of control and get a bit overwhelmed by the situation. So I think two DMs. I mean, I think it's Klopp's credit. The 4-4-2. It was an interesting change. Against, obviously it was against Rangers, and it was a
mm,
diamond of sorts. But the problem is, it's just, you need three bodies in that midfield. I don't think you can survive with two in a 4-4-2. I think you need three, a
yeah,
midfield
exactly,
three. So I just think
exactly.
you're already at a disadvantage numerically, and then with the technical point of view, you're even in a greater disadvantage. So I don't know. It's a really difficult situation, and obviously
Yeah,
Bellingham's been touted about, and obviously he is a solution. Caicedo is also a suggestion as well. I mean, Barella, I would love. Well, I'm an Inter Milan fan, but I don't want him to go. But if there was one club that really should get him based on the profile of the player and the team in terms of the perfect match, Barella on the right hand side would be fantastic. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of problems there, systematic problems. But to be fair, I mean, I can understand. I was looking into the stats on the offensive side, and I must say I can understand, because Klopp always has this puzzled look on his face when journalists have say, your team looks a bit off, not producing much. But if you look at the XG of Liverpool this season, and you look in terms of the shot creation, it's actually pretty good, to be fair. It's in the top 5% in the league. So, I mean, it's pretty impressive. I mean, they are generating a lot of chances, but the issue is, I think, as obviously, which we'll probably talk about, is Darwin Núñez in terms of his raw abilities, unable to finish. I mean, I produced a graph on my Instagram channel, Zach Gas, by the way, about his variance in shots. So he gets a lot of high quality shots. So you get the difference between quality of shots or quality of chances and the kind of actual
yeah,
end product. You're getting high quality chances and you're getting very low quality finishing, basically. You're getting that wide variance, that wide difference, that discrepancy. And to be fair, it just shows that if he had, okay, give him benefit of the doubt and give him time, I guess, but if he had an out and out number 9, ready made number 9,
yeah,
a lot of those chances would have been finished, and maybe Liverpool would be in a different situation than where they are now. But obviously, that seems to paper the cracks for now, because that doesn't solve the midfield problem. But
yeah,
yeah, it seems to be many problems, obviously stemming from the midfield, but it does seem to affect the defense. It affects the attack as well, and it also affects the lines as well, because the midfield are playing a lot deeper, but the defensive line is still high, so it creates a lot of problems there. And then when the midfield react late or counter press late, it leaves the defense completely exposed. So Yeah, that creates many problems. And Klopp has
Yeah,
always been saying structure and lines, lines, lines. The distances is just too wide, and I can understand that. To be fair, I think he is right. But the solution is that midfield. The DM, as I said, is the most important position to solve that
yeah.
problem.
Well, legs. I'd say a DM, but legs as well because you know the midfield we're most successful with was Henderson in his prime, Fabinho, and Wijnaldum, who was, they were massive engines, and they'd run across the park and they'd be going for 90 minutes straight. And as I said, we outran every team. I think
Mm,
that's the biggest problem. But also something, and this might be going on to the growing influence that's
hmm
reported of Pep Linders, is
mm,
is is the difference of 4-3-3 that we're
mm,
playing, because it's not the same 4-3-3 that we were playing
yeah.
under, some people say, Buvac, or just after Buvac, where it was quite a solid structure 4-3-3, where the two eights would provide cover and sit solid in the midfield, and the number six would also just screen the defense. Now we're playing with what seems like an advanced eight. We're trying to force this advanced eight sort of position along Salah's side, which has made Salah um, go wider and further away from goal. So our biggest goal scoring threat is now further away from goal, and we've shoehorned a Henderson or Harvey Elliott into an attacking eight position between the lines, who, number one, I don't think they have the ability to perform that. Elliot, not yet. He might go on to do that, but not yet. Elliot doesn't have the defensive nous to do that. And that's also left Trent exposed. Because now, whereas before he's had Henderson holding his hand, as you like to say, or helping him out defensively. Now he's by himself, and that's limited Trent because he's having to deal with a lot more one-on-ones. I'm sure that reflects in the stats. He's getting beaten a lot more because he hasn't just dropped off a cliff defensively.
Mm.
He's he's lost support on that side, which means he can't focus on his attacking ability, which is one thing that um we've been missing this season. I think he got his first assist against Brighton, not the FA Cup game, the Premier League game, which is just recent, which is astounding considering Trent's probably the best creative fullback in Premier League history,
Mm.
in my opinion. So midfield's not only, it's sort of affecting every other department of our play as well. Um, So yeah. So what do you think about sort of the back room, the goings on? Obviously, Julian Ward's left. Michael Edwards left first of all. Then Julian Ward left 12 months later. Julian Ward was meant to be the sort of long-term successor. He left in 12 months. Obviously, there's reports of growing influence around Pep Linders.
Mm.
Um, there's growing influence around him. I always just find difficult pronouncing his name. Is it Krawitz or something?
Kravitz,
The
yeah,
head of fitness at
yeah.
Liverpool. Reports coming out today that there's a bit of unrest around him and his growing influence.
Mm.
What's going on? What's
I don't
going
know.
on?
I wish I was there to see it, to be fair. But Pep Linders, I think his book's very telling. I must say. I mean, this
Yeah,
idea
that's
of having
ridiculous.
that,
I'm sorry. Yeah,
yeah,
that's ridiculous.
yeah, and the coaches' voices as well. But
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, this idea of having these, well, he calls them free tens. He likes to have very advanced midfielders that occupy half spaces, basically. So it forces obviously Salah very wide, the front three to be a lot wider and a lot more isolated. So, but yeah, as you say, you don't have the players for that. I mean, it's nice on paper, but you don't have the players for that. And I think him having that, that growing, and I think that reflects his growing influence because obviously he's having a lot more of a say in the tactics and how the players should be playing. And obviously him releasing that in a book or in interviews is just shows that
mm,
it's slightly undermining. I must say. I mean, it's a bit of a self-defeating
yeah,
aim because you're giving basically. I mean, the idea is that you give information away so that oppositions can then work on it and then you can then counteract on that, whatever. I don't know, this
yeah.
kind of
It's
reverse
silly.
psychology.
It's
It's
silly.
it's just not very helpful. It's very
Silly.
destabilizing,
It's
and it's
like
just
it's
not.
like it's like so I say it's like going
Mm,
to war. It's like going to war and telling your enemy exactly what you're gonna do.
yeah,
It's like telling them, I'm going to charge from this route, so I'll meet you there 6 p.m. tomorrow. It's the most stupid thing. The
yeah,
the whole point is to be unexpected and people not know what you're gonna do.
yeah,
Obviously, as I said, what assistant managers ever released a book
yeah.
about the tactics of a team they're still at and they still employ the same tactics? How does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's never a good idea, and I think it is. I do think it does undermine. I mean, the fact that got Royal forward and somehow it suggests that it's okay, he's okay with it is just. I don't. For me, it's for the birds. I mean, you can't. that's so undermining. I don't think anyone would want an assistant manager to speak more than the manager does, to be fair. I mean, you shouldn't really know their name, to be fair, in my opinion. I mean, they shouldn't
Yeah,
really have much of a media profile. But I think what's also been telling about Linders is this recent interview that he had. I don't know which journal it was or which newspaper outlet it was, but he was talking about his career ambitions in the middle of a season where Liverpool are really struggling. I mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
I
find
mean,
that so
yeah.
bizarre. I find
I
that
mean,
so bizarre.
I don't know how normal it is for assistant manager as agents. I don't
Mm,
know how normal that is,
yeah,
but I found that a bit odd. Um, yeah, I mean, he's linked with the Ajax job. I, for one, obviously, I think Pep Linders has done a good job at Liverpool, but
yeah,
I think Ferguson was done it best, where he knew the expiry date of assistant managers, and when new ideas and a refresh was needed at the club, and I think that's exactly what's needed at Liverpool. To be fair, so I would not be against seeing Pep Linders leave, just because not because he's a bad sort of assistant manager or anything, just because maybe it's time for a refresh. Doing the same thing for 5 years can get tedious, and sort of the players just might need a new idea to sort of rejuvenate them. I think that could be good. So I have said I wouldn't mind seeing Gerrard as an assistant manager possibly, or if the sort of bridges can be mended with Buvac, I think that would be um a good um a good appointment. But just someone to refresh the ideas, just a new face round the block.
yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it will be interesting to see how Pep Linders, if he was to take the Ajax
Mm.
job, how he does. I mean, his predecessor also only lasted 6 months and didn't do particularly well, and he
Oh,
was the assistant manager to Ronald Koeman at Barcelona, so that's quite
mm,
interesting. Yeah, I mean, for me, you know what's interesting because here it's quite obvious about how Pep Linders is operating. It's so obvious, it's so explicit. But with Ferguson, it wasn't even okay. We need to freshen things up. It was just that if he sensed something was slightly off, it was such an
yeah,
intuitive thing. If he sensed something was slightly off, something was 1% off, he would just change. I mean, Brian Kidd obviously it was well known, was quite publicized for departure.
yeah,
But Steve McLaren became assistant manager to Sven-Göran Eriksson and Middlesbrough. And so he had his own aspirations. Carlos Queiroz, he took over when he came as assistant manager, was there for a couple of years, then took the Real Madrid job and then came back. So, Ferguson always was very aware, was very wary, I think, of what the assistant managers were really up to and what their ambitions were. And I think Klopp, these are alarm bells really, because they're so bait. But yeah, he hasn't really made those changes. It just suggests, as you said, the loyalty not only to the players but to his staff is also a problem. I mean, he only
100%.
extended his contract with on the condition that his staff extended their contracts. So,
Exactly.
and I think that could be quite problematic. I mean, I don't know why
100%.
he's so attached. I mean, I get them; they've done a great job, and for the first half of whatever, for however long they've been there, but things, it's starting to undermine everything and undo everything that they've done in terms of the
Yeah.
progress. And it's frustrating fans. And
Mm.
and it's dividing fans as well, because people actually don't know who to blame. You talk about Klopp being happy with the midfield in August and in this window, saying we've got 7 or 8 midfielders and they can only fill three
Yeah.
positions. And then all of a sudden, just going back and saying, oh, we should have really looked into the market and get midfielders because we've got this injury crisis. And it's just, you just don't know who to blame and who's responsible. And it's just really frustrating. It's just, he's not very clear. I think he does waffle a lot in my opinion, but he's just not honest. And, I don't want him to throw FSG under the bus. I mean, that's not how he goes. So it's fair enough. But just a bit of honesty saying, you know what, we wanted midfield, we couldn't find it, fair enough. Or, it's too expensive or whatever. But I just find it so confusing, so bizarre, and it's just amazing how the mighty have fallen so quickly. To be fair, as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And I think, you know, Liverpool, that's probably at the moment. If you want us to touch on anything specific at Liverpool, just let us know, and we'll cover that
Yeah,
in depth. Zach, are Liverpool getting top four? That's the real question.
I
Are they
don't
getting
think they
top four?
will. I don't think they
Yeah.
will.
No, no, we don't do thinks. We don't do
I've
maybes. Are
Well,
Liverpool
if
getting
you
top
look at the
four? Yes or
expected
no?
points, I say no, because if you look at the expected points, which I have with me here, which is basically based on a simulation of models of repeating many games as possible and seeing how many points they'll get out of it based on
Yeah.
XG per shot and etc. Liverpool are actually bang on, where they got 29 points at the moment and they expect